Okay, we got one more project to do on the Model A. The trunk had some leaks, and come to find out the drip rail has some pinholes in it. There's no seals, and where the drip rail empties at the bottom, it was pouring part of the water into the trunk rather than out onto the ground. So gonna have to come up with some way to avoid pouring the water into the trunk. And also, I think one of the trunk hinges had a cracked weld. It was a little bit loose, and it was causing the upper left corner of the trunk to bounce just a little bit. Driving down the road, I'd hit a bump and I was always hearing this rattle in the back, and I tightened up everything and I couldn't figure out, and I finally realized that the corner of the trunk would bounce a little bit, so I think that's where my rattle was coming from. So we're gonna re-weld and reinforce the trunk lid to try to get rid of that rattle. As you can see, there's no rubber seals on this trunk, and up here in the top there's a few little holes. The water would run down into here and then it would drip down into the trunk. So we're going to work on putting seals all around here. We're going to plug up all the holes. I know there's a large hole over here. That was the original trunk hinge. Of course, we got aftermarket trunk hinges here. And there's a little bit of movement right here with this hinge mount. I think one of the welds is cracked, maybe more than one. So I'm going to reinforce this with a bar and re-weld, take care of that situation, and then we're going to work on seals, plugging up holes. Okay, we got the bolts loose. Got two more to take out and take this trunk lid off. Couple of holes right here that would let water come into the trunk. Over in this corner, if I put the light behind there, you can see holes, light coming through. Big time over here. All these holes need to be plugged up. I was thinking about putting this bar across here attached to these two hinge mounts. So I'm trying to come up with a way to attach this bar all welded on, something like this. Well, we'll get back to you when I figure out what I'm going to do. What I finally decided I can do, and if I just weld that to the inside skin of the trunk in various locations, that should stiffen up this whole area so that I don't get any flex out of these hinge pads. I'm going to add weld to these hinge plates. And then I made up this bar to weld in here. And it will help support these hinge plates. It's going to be all welded onto the trunk lining, plus the hinge plates. It'll stiffen up all this metal so that when the trunk flexes, this inside won't flex so much. Got this whole support bar welded in. We're going to clean up and repaint the inside of the trunk, and then move on to the gutters around the back of the car. Okay, I primed and sprayed the whole inside of the trunk. It's time to get back here and plug up some holes. I also need to find a way to allow the water to drain out the bottom. Right now, I believe it gets caught. Some of it comes into the trunk right at this corner and at the other corner. So some of my trunk leakage was due to this drip channel, which comes around and empties right into the trunk. I believe the original Model A floorboard came up like this, and it was all open underneath, allowing the water to dump out through the bottom openings. You can see light down through here. So rather than try to reshape this whole drip panel, I'm gonna keep my floorboard flat. It gives me more trunk space, and I've made a piece of metal that's gonna weld in here just like that. It's gonna be welded tight and seam sealed all in the trunk area of the floor. That will allow the water to have its own channel to dump right out on the ground. I'm going to give that a shot, and I'm going to have to do the same thing to the other side. Well, I didn't have my camera on for a while, so what I've done was seal up, weld up some holes along the drip edge, put seam sealer in, so there should be no leakage into the trunk from this drip edge. Now what I did inside is welded them in place, but seam sealed those, so now the drip edge dumps into this channel, which goes completely out the bottom. So hopefully, let me get a view of the drip edge here. Water would come down, and you can see light way down below. That's dumping out onto the road rather than into the trunk. I think that's gonna fix this up. And got a little painting to do in here. And also, when I get the trunk lid back on, rather than this support, I think I'm going to try some gas shock supports. Also, inside of this trunk here, this back section was always exposed, all my taillight wiring. So what I'm going to do is make a panel to come across here. screw it on up in here so that I can remove it if I need to work on this wiring. And I found a piece of metal that I think is going to work just fine. Let me go get that. I have this nice corrugated piece of metal here. It's came off the tailgate from my friend's old Ford pickup. Some of the metal that I also used on the Roadster. So I cut this to length, and I think it's going to work as a panel to cover up my taillight wiring. I had to add a piece onto it because it wasn't quite tall enough. I've got it all drilled, painted on the back. I'm going to leave this blue on here. Seeing the car's blue, not the same blue, but this will go good inside the trunk. So let's take it over here and see how it fits. Nice. I also put this rubber strip on the bottom so it won't be clanking against the floor of the trunk. I got spot for 4 screws, and I'd say that's gonna do just what I want it to do. Hopefully we keep the water out. Now we got to work on putting the trunk lid back on, fasten to the hinges, get it all lined up, and wait for the rain to come. Well, I got the trunk lid all back in place. And I may still work on some gas shocks for this. I'm not sure what I'm going to find for gas shocks and how to attach those, but I'm going to wrap this up for now. This part is complete, and thanks for watching this video, and we'll get back to work on the Roadster. See you later.